Hey there, and welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. Now, today I am going to chat about something that is kind of big right now happening in the industry. If you are a photographer in the wedding industry, you know how busy we all are in summer 2021, basically ripping our hair out a little bit with how many clients we have. We've compounded everything that happened last year into this year, plus our regular clients this year. And our business is probably at almost burnout phase, if not just the ultimate extreme of busy phase. And your photography business is probably growing at a speed that you are not ready for it. And you're probably in a position where you're overwhelmed with the amount of clients you need to serve and probably inquiries coming in as well. And a great way to handle those increasing clients is to hire associate photographers. A question that has been continually popping up in our Facebook group and in my DMs is how to hire associate photographers legally. Do they need to be independent contractors? Do they need to be employees? What can and can I not control regarding my associate photographers? What about equipment and insurance? Well, the good news is in some instances, your associate photographer does need to be an employee, but for the majority of people in the industry, they can be legally hired as independent contractors. And I am going to go through in this episode how to do that the right way and how not to get audited and get in trouble and do it the wrong way. So are you ready for it? Let's do this, Legal Pagers. You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. As a reminder, before we get into this episode, I am legally obligated to give my disclaimer. So I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. All legal information I talk about on this episode is intended for the masses and a large variety of different businesses. I am only your attorney when you hire me and we sign an engagement letter for me to work specifically on your legal issues. Please feel free to seek out another attorney in your hometown if you need specific legal advice or contact me for more information. Alrighty, here's the episode, friends. Okay, my friends, like I said in the intro, we're talking all about hiring associate photographers legally and ensuring that you basically are crossing all your T's and dotting all your I's. What I have been seeing, I've been going to a bunch of in-person events and workshops and conferences lately as our country has opened back up due to the pandemic. And with that, I have noticed people consistently talking about how busy they are, that they cannot control the amount of inquiries coming in and the amount of clients that they already have on tap in their business. So a lot of photographers right now are reaching for the one easy solution, I would say, which is hiring an associate photographer. Now, I stopped at the word easy because while it seems like kind of the one-size-fits-all solution for everyone, hiring an associate photographer is not exactly an easy task. Yes, maybe finding someone and just having an agreement and having them sign it is pretty simplistic in terms of checking the boxes that you need to check. But are you fully aware of all of the kind of risks and liabilities that you're taking on when you hire an associate photographer? Are you ensuring that you're doing it the right way? And are you preparing yourself for if any audit were to occur from 2021, so this would probably happen in 2022 when you file your taxes, or 2023, that you hired all of these associate photographers this year the right way? Because what is going on is people are not saying, oh, I want to have a huge associate team. This is what I plan on doing for years and years to come. They're literally like, this is what I need right now in this season. season to just randomly hire some associate photographers, try to train them as best as I can to fit my style. I'm going to continually do all of the rest of the editing and the client experience and the post-processing and basically everything possible besides I can't be the lead shooter at that event. Then if you are just kind of doing this temporarily, I want to make sure that you're doing it the right way for this very, very, very busy wedding season of 2021. Okay, so the first thing you need to do legally when hiring an associate is you need to make some very critical decisions. The biggest one is, are you hiring them as an employee or a contractor? And then you need to decide on what you personally want and what is legally required for employees or for contractors that you're bringing on. I'm going to quickly go over the difference between employees and contractors. I've talked about this in other podcast episodes. You can literally just go search the Legal Paige podcast on your favorite podcasting app that you listen on, and you will find tons of episodes where I go deeper in depth on this topic. But I really want to ensure that you are fully aware of how they are very different in terms of taxes, what they can and cannot do, and insurance purposes. So if you hire a contractor but treat them as an employee in all legal senses, and I say when because I don't think it's if you're going to get audited by the IRS. This is an easy flag for them in their system, and they're going to start seeing some signs and red flags will pop up for them. And they'll be like, we need to audit this small business. It looks like they're hiring employees, yet all of them are deemed contractors. So when you get audited by the IRS, I want you to be prepared for that situation. So let's go over the difference between the two. An employee is someone that follows your sole discretion, is required to do very specific tasks assigned to them by you. Usually they're working hourly. Usually they have set amount of hours that they work. Usually you tell them where to be when and when they can get off of work. And for employees in particular, you are responsible as the employer for providing proper tax documentation, workers' compensation insurance as required by your state, paying for all costs incurred, and employee-based regulations, and ensuring that you are following all of the employee statutes of your state. You also have to pay a portion of taxes and put them on payroll. A contractor, though, an independent contractor, is a person that works events under your brand name, but typically has their own photography business on the side, and they're only working a select amount of events for you. They are not employed by you, but they're hired for those specific events that you offer to them, and they have the ability to say no, right? So they're not going to get fired like an employee would. Employees have to say yes. Contractors, you give them the option of, can you do this event? Or if not, that's okay. I'll move on to finding someone else. You do not need to pay for any type of unemployment insurance or workers' compensation because they aren't employees for your business. And essentially, you're just sending them a flat amount and rate for the event that they worked for you. Usually they're not paid hourly. They're paid in kind of a lump sum amount. That's a really, really good way of tracking that they're contractors. And then there's legal guidelines that vary from state to state regarding employees versus contractors. So just make sure that you review those specific state laws as well when you're hiring an associate photographer. But that all in a nutshell is the basis of employees versus contractors. And the one thing I said in the previous episode and that I continue to say as an attorney is the word control. It's literally all about control. How much do you control them? It's like a balance or a scale. If you are controlling them too much, the IRS is going to say that looks too much like an employee and they deserve all of these employment rights that other employees do. And if you are allowing them that independence, that word is in independent contractor for a reason, and you're only kind of asking them to do certain things, like of course you have certain protocols and guidelines as the lead photographer hiring an associate, but you're kind of allowing them full discretion to amount to those guidelines and protocols to the best of their abilities when they're on site for you. Then you don't have as much control. So just make sure you're weighing that balancing scale. And I'm going to talk about how different factors play into that balancing scale when you're hiring on associate photographers. All right, the very first thing I want you to be aware of is most often photographers right now, I would say in this busy season we're all in, are looking to hire temporary work. So they want an associate photographer who can step in as the lead for them at an event or at a session because you're busy editing and you have like 80 million other things to do on behalf of your business, but they're only doing it for a set period of time. You don't want to bring these people on and basically have a whole associate team forever and ever and ever. Maybe you do, but maybe that's just not in the cards right now. And honestly, you probably don't even have the time to figure all of that out because it is way more complicated and lengthy to hire on employees. When you are just bringing on a sole photographer as an associate for your business for a select event or session, the two big things I want you to ask of them is one, make sure they're using their own equipment, and two, make sure they have their own business insurance. So lack of insurance is an issue found more so with contractors. And that's because an employee falls under your business's insurance. So you need to have workers' compensation. You need to have business insurance that says everything your employees do will be covered by your particular business insurance. But there are exclusions to your business insurance and any other type of insurance that you may have, or, like risk policies out there for your photography business. Any type of contractor that does something for your business is going to be excluded from those policies under the exclusions part of your insurance policy, like four corners of your document. So you need to make sure that they send you a certificate of insurance. Any type is fine. Usually I say, you want probably $100,000 minimum per occurrence and $1 million aggregate. That's pretty standard for a policy deck page for a photographer to hand to you. That's usually what venues require as well. But just make sure that you have on hand a copy of their insurance policy, that they are for sure a legitimate business who has an insurance policy. And basically what this does is it makes sure that you're not controlling them. They're acting within their own bubble. They have their own, business over here, and you are on the other side. And then make sure they're using their own equipment. So personal equipment is absolutely necessary for contractors, primarily to show that they are not your employee, but also to ensure that your equipment is not damaged and that you are increasing your liability and risk for that. So if your equipment is being used by someone else and then is broken, or it's used by someone else and it malfunctions, it's likely that your insurance is not going to cover the costs because they are not listed under your plan because they're a contractor. So if you have any type of gear insurance, like you're literally putting yourself in a position where then that gear isn't covered. So make sure that they are using their own equipment. Like I just swear to you, sometimes it's really hard because I've done this day of, even with second shooters. And here we're talking about associate photographers, but the same goes for second shooters. You don't want to just be like, oh, you don't have an 85 millimeter, but you are still using Canon. That's okay. I have an 85 millimeter, put it on your camera and use it. Don't do that. Make sure that you're hiring people who have the necessary lenses and gear available to do all of the work that you would do if you were the lead photographer. No sharing, and same goes for memory cards. So this is where the scale kind of tips for me, where I could easily argue as your attorney that they're using all of their own equipment, but honestly, just for feasibility and like streamlining your workflow and systems, you need to hand them your memory card so that then you can just take that and get it back from them right away. And you don't have to worry about copying the files over and then sending the card back to them. Yes, I could make that argument for you, but do you kind of feel the vibe I'm giving you right here? Like that's having to kind of defend yourself on why you were doing that. Instead, you could just put yourself in a position where you say, I still need you to use all of your own memory cards. And here is the route we're going to go about me ensuring that I gather that data from you after the event. Usually that's they send all of their gear, like they go back, they back up, of course, all of their memory cards. And then they send their memory cards to you, or you find a mutually good location where you can just sit down with your computer and external hard drive and gather that data from their memory cards onto your, hard drive and computer and cloud, so on and so forth. That is an easier way to say they used all their own equipment, and you don't even have to come up with a defense to the reason behind why you gave them a memory card. So you can give them memory cards. I'm not going to say that you absolutely can't, but as an attorney, I would always say, step one is make sure that they're using their own gear, equipment, and memory cards as a whole. And if not, just make sure that that balance is still tipping in favor of them primarily using the majority of their own gear, equipment, and insurance. Okay, and then quickly, I want to talk about the ability to say no, because that's a huge thing with control here, is I think what happens is, especially in this busy, it's I would say 2 to 5 month temporary period of time where all of us as photographers we've never ever had this many clients and this much to do. There's so many tasks that we can't do them all. And so having someone at least shoot for us and then us kind of being on the back end would ease some of that busyness. But because it's just a temporary period of time, 2 to 5 months, I think some people are hiring on associate photographers the wrong way, where they say, sign this one independent contractor agreement, and you're going to be okay for whichever events and sessions you take on for my business. I would caution you to not do that if you're just having kind of a temporary period of time that these associate photographers are working for you and you're bringing them onto your business. I would actually have them have the ability to say no. So present them with a work opportunity as a contractor. Hey, I have this wedding open. I really need an associate photographer. Can you do it? Are you available? If they say yes, then perfect. Then they sign the independent contractor agreement for that specific wedding or event. And if they say no, then that's okay. Then you don't send them a contract and you move on to finding hopefully someone else to fill that position. So make sure that they are in control of their own schedule and they are in control of when they are contracting to work for you. I think if you're hiring on an associate team where they're working for you for a longer period of time, then they look a lot more like employees, and you're going to get into stickier situations where you basically need an attorney on hand for you to really balance out the scale and make sure that they are still going to be contractors in your specific instance. And so I just say, it might be overly complicated to get them to sign a contract multiple times for basically the same purpose, just for different dates. But I would tell you that the proof is in the pudding there, where if you can be no, I didn't just sign one contract and then they worked with me forever and ever. In the eyes of the IRS and in your state government, that's going to look a lot like an employee, and you were just kind of trying to skirt around it by having them sign a contractor agreement. Instead, if you are presented in an audit, you can argue you have, 10 different contracts for 10 different dates that they were working for you, and they signed each one individually because they had the choice whether or not to do it. And you can also probably show those emails as proof and evidence as well. And so that gives you a lot better credibility for, ensuring that you were trying to legally hire them only as contractors in those instances. Now, something that I want to touch on is within your independent contractor agreement, and also basically your business policies and procedures for bringing on associate photographers as non-employees, so as contractors. You want to be very clear about using photos and talking with clients. So this is an issue that can fall under employees or contractors, but it can really cause a detrimental impact to your business. So when an associate takes photos for your event, and for your clients that you have hired on, those materials are legally owned by your business, especially if they're employees. Usually it's just completely employee. If the employee makes anything or has copyright ownership, it is assumed and subsumed by the employer who is above them. But you actually have to expressly delineate this in independent contractor agreements to ensure that even though they're hired as contractors, because essentially when they click the shutter on the camera, they own the copyright to those images because they created it, they composed it, they took the shot, boom, the shot that they had the idea and thought of is then transferred to a tangible medium, which means it is going onto your memory card. They immediately own the copyright to that. And you need to ensure in your independent contractor agreements when you're hiring associate photographers that that copyright is immediately assigned to you as the lead photographer who's hiring them. So your business owns all of the copyrights to those images. So that's important. And then a typical case of copyright infringement that you all need to be aware of in this season of temporarily hiring associate photographers, I would say, is that some lead photographers will allow photos to be used by associate photographers for their portfolios. And that's perfectly acceptable to do, but it needs to be very strictly enforced because it's basically claiming representation of your brand and your images as their own. So you need to have an entire clause in your associate photographer independent contractor agreement that says you can use photos within X period of time. Usually it's a certain period of time after the wedding or event so that you are kind of first in right, first in use. You are using the images for probably, I would say anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks is pretty standard. Some people even have 6 months in their contract, but honestly, if you're hiring temporarily, like these associates, something you could at least give them for like as goodwill for working for your business is, yes, I'll allow you to use these photos like decently quick for your portfolio. So I would say anywhere from about 4 to 8 weeks. That will allow non-confusion with clients and people at the wedding and vendors that you were, of course, the lead photographer. You get all your imagery out there. You send all your imagery to your clients. I guess now I'm going to just say it really depends on when you give the full gallery to your clients. If you are in a season right now where you're pushing that deadline pretty damn close and you're, at 12, 14 weeks of getting galleries back, then you probably want to give them a little cushion afterward to share all of your great work and then let your associate photographer use the images. So if that's the case, then we're not looking at 4 to 8 weeks for them to use the images. We're probably looking at, I would say 16 to 20 weeks for them to be able to use your imagery, but they would probably need to edit it and make it a little bit different than your editing. So edit to their specific, like editing style, and then they can post. And usually you also select an amount of photos. You don't just leave it all open-ended and say, you can use some of these images that I still own the copyright for. So it's a limited commercial use situation where you are allowing them to commercially present these images that you own for their own business for a particular purpose. And you want to say, usually it's like 5 to 10 photos that they can choose. And you want full discretion on which ones you can say no to them using. Because say, for example, there's this one image from the wedding that maybe your associate photographer shot, but then it becomes like the photo for the wedding. Like it's the one that all of the vendors post and maybe went like mini viral in your hometown because everyone loved it. It's the one that you now have on your website. You want the ability to say, no, you can't use that one for your website because it's going to create confusion, right? Of who took what photos for your clients. And you obviously, you want to give them the ability to showcase the images that they took, but have the ability to say no just for situations and, like I just presented to you. And so I always say like 5 to 10 images is pretty standard in the industry for allowing them to use, but that you can say no and they can, they need to give you like 20 to 25 photos that they would like to use. And then you can choose the final 5 to 10 or something along those lines. So just make that really, really clear in your independent contractor agreement when you're hiring them on. And another issue that follows use of photos is actually solicitation and competition. So similar to using your business's photos, occasionally an associate photographer may try soliciting their own photography services to guests while working at an event for you, or even like talking to clients, right? It's just kind of how reality works at a wedding or event. Your clients are going to be like, oh, do you usually work for Paige? And the person would say, no, I actually don't. This is, I'm just temporarily stepping in for a couple weddings this summer to help her out because she's really busy. And then you basically want them to stop there, right? And say, that's kind of it. You don't want them to then start soliciting their own business and say, I have my own photography business. If you ever need anything, you can reach out to me here. That is what you want to try and avoid. So you need to have what's called kind of NDA, non-disclosure language in your independent contractor agreement. This can also be just a confidentiality clause. You can have them sign an individual like one-pager NDA, and you want to have solicitation clauses in your independent contractor agreements when hiring on associate photographers. And those just state that associates can't promote their services or represent themselves while working at an event under your brand. Now, for employees, and this is a biggie here because people are always like, Paige, I want them to sign a non-compete. That doesn't work. You cannot hire an independent contractor and then tell them not to compete. The whole point of contractors is that they are allowed to work with other people and basically be in the same industry you are. For employees, you can always have them sign non-competes, and obviously you're controlling them even more. Of course, non-compete agreements have to be very, very specific in region and time, and the proximity of a non-compete agreement can't be incredibly vast, or it's really just deemed invalid by a court. But all in all, I've probably shoved this down your throat a few times if you've listened to my podcast episodes. Don't have non-compete agreements for contractors. They're just never going to work. They're never going to hold up in court. And so don't try to do it. Don't try to put in a non-compete clause. Don't try to put in a non-compete agreement and attach it to your contractor, agreements that you're hiring associate photographers for. Just have a confidentiality clause and a non-solicitation clause in your contract. And that confidentiality clause is really going to help you be like, whatever you find out about my business, my pricing, the clients I work with, actual personal information of clients as well, emails, where they work, those type of things. All of that needs to stay confidential while you are contracting to work for me. Lastly, let's chat about fees and expenses. So fees and expenses are completely circumstantial based on what you offer as a business owner. And it's really a topic that needs to be handled differently between employees and contractors. So for employees, of course, fees and expenses will be directly given to you by the client, and then you're going to pay the employee as normal. So usually you'll get hired, then your employees submit hourly invoices every month or every, bi-weekly, and then you pay them through payroll. You pay your share of taxes. They, of course, get deducted their taxes from their pay stubs every month or, every paycheck, I guess, if you do it, bi-weekly as well. And yeah, it really just acts as a W-2 employee. Most of us have worked in W-2 positions where we have an employer, where we have, sent them our I-9s, W-4s, and then they've put us on payroll. They're going to, of course, have a workers' compensation insurance and unemployment insurance to cover us as employees if something were to happen. And so it's very, very simplistic for most of us on how employees are paid. They're paid through their employers on a pay stub, right? Because they're on payroll. For contractors, it's a bit different. So the client is, of course, going to pay you directly as the lead photographer, right? For the event and all costs incurred. And especially for travel, for amount of hours worked or the, total amount of the event, I would say make sure that they're invoicing you for a lump sum versus hours. And retainers, of course, the clients are going to charge you. It's all going to be invoiced to you separately. And when you pay the contractor, the biggest thing for paying them something is they need to send you an invoice. Don't just say for this event, usually I allow associates to make about $100 an hour. You worked 8 hours. So I'm just going to,
I'll send you a check for $800. And that's kind of the end of the discussion. I wouldn't do that. I would tell them to send you an invoice from their photography business to your photography business for a lump sum of $800 for the event worked on X date. And if there's any additional like reimbursement for travel or anything, that needs to be on the invoice as well. And then I want you to pay them from your business bank account in some respect. Please don't pay them on Venmo. I have been on many rants about Venmo, so I digress there. Just make sure that that cha-ching moment is coming in and out of your business bank account legally. I would say a check is a good way to do it. You can set them up on like bill pay or direct deposit and just send it to them like a one-time situation when you're paying an invoice. Those are the best ways to go about it. Zelle is a good way too, where you're kind of like linking ACH transfers. If you use PayPal, of course, fees come out. So I just don't suggest kind of those third-party payment processors where someone's going to get charged the service fees, transaction fees. And actually, usually it's the person that's invoicing you. So your associate photographer would make less money. And I just wouldn't put them in that position. That's not very kind. So yeah, just make sure invoices are a big, big thing. I think people forget about that step and they just send associate photographers money. And that does not look good. That kind of looks like their employees as well. All right, those are all of the main legal topics I wanted to discuss in this episode, but I do now need to tell you about what contracts to get and where you can get them. So we have worked alongside a lot of different photographers in the industry that have built up very substantial associate photographer programs. And then usually they coach other people on building associate photographer programs as well. So the big people that I would that I would direct you to if you need additional information are Grace Troutman Photography. So Grace has an incredible associate photographer program where most of her associates are all independent contractors. And then the same goes for Kylie Ann Studios. So Kylie Ann also hires primarily contracted associates. And so if you're looking for kind of additional coaching surrounding that, go check out those two. My good friend Maddie May of Inventor Instead actually has employees come on as lead photographers. And so if you're looking for a little more guidance in that respect, she has a really good way of basically building an employee model for an associate program. Now, all of them usually, I would say, promote our contracts. And I worked with all of them on creating all of our contracts. So all of these industry leaders have had eyes on this contract these contracts and have critiqued and given me lots of feedback to make these contracts better and better for you to use as template contracts for your business. So there are two options of associate photographer contracts in the Legal Paige shop. There is the one that is purchased, I would say the majority, 95% of the time, which is an independent contractor agreement for associate photographers. That's the one you're going to want to get if you are listening to me in this episode and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to absolutely hire them as a contractor. And I'm going to do all the steps that Paige says. And then boom, I'm going to have them sign the independent contractor agreement for associate photographers. That is the contract between you as the lead photographer hiring them and the associate. Okay. And then if you want to hire them as an employee, you need an employee agreement. We have that one as well for associate photographers if you are, in that court. Now, the other thing you need to do is you need to add clauses to your client contract. And some people forget this. They just kind of have an email conversation or a phone conversation with their clients. Like, I'm bringing a different associate on to work this wedding for you. You need to make sure that that's legally agreed to in your existing contract. And because things are changing so drastically right now with what's happening in the industry and the busyness and the client overload, is your existing contract probably didn't have anything surrounding associate photographers and lead photographers. So you need to add in via contract addendum. And this isn't an amendment situation because you're not amending something in your existing contract. You're actually adding on clauses, which is in a contract addendum. Okay. So it's like an additional contract. Basically, it states at the beginning that the remainder of your contract remains in full force and effect. You're just adding these 2 new clauses to the contract, and then you have both parties sign at the bottom, or all parties if you have 3 people signing. You need these 2 clauses: the lead photographer at a wedding clause, and then a substitution of an associate photographer clause. So the lead photographer at the wedding clause is going to explain to your clients who will be the lead at the wedding. You're going to say that you hire associates, that this is they will be the ones in attendance at the wedding. They're hired by you, all of their professional standards and business values and ethics will be set forth by you as the photographer, but they'll be the one actually shooting the wedding, that all of your, booking, editing, communications, photo delivery will still be through you primarily and your business, that they've been vetted by you, and that they're going to try to give your clients the best experience possible. So that's boom, they're the lead photographer. You need to add that clause into your contract. And then you need to add in the substitution of an associate photographer clause, because I'm sure you're all wondering, well, what happens if something happens to the associate photographer and they can no longer be the lead photographer at the wedding? Do I immediately have to step in, or do I have discretion to try to find another associate photographer? The answer is both. So you need a clause that states if the associate photographer that was named and told to the clients is no longer able to be present at the wedding due to many different situations, you can put in including but not limited to language. And you can say, due to including but not limited to injury, death of themselves or a family member, familial issues, personal religious reasons, illness, pregnancy, so on and so forth. Those are usually the big ones that I would see in those clauses. Then you will step in as the lead photographer if you're available. And if you're not available to step in due to scheduling conflicts, that you reserve the right to find another competent professional to be the lead photographer and associate photographer for your business for their wedding and event. And you just want to make sure all this communication is conveyed very, very clearly to your clients. Get on the phone with them and then follow it up with an email documentation of what's going on. If you are having scheduling issues and you're having to move associate photographers around, say if someone gets sick, or God forbid, right now with COVID coming back on the rise, I think we're all a little scared. We have everyone lined up for the next 2 to 3 months. But what happens? Someone gets sick, then I'm going to have to try to fill voids and holes right now with all of my weddings and sessions that I have planned for my business. So those 2 clauses need to be added to your existing client contracts, and then make sure you're also signing the contract with your associate photographer for each and every event and session, especially when they're just temporarily working for you. That's it, you guys. I know that was a lot of information, but hopefully it was very helpful. I am here if you have any additional questions. You can always reach out to us at support@thelegalpage.com, or you can just go find me on Instagram @thelegalpage. I'm so excited you're bringing on associate photographers. It's a very common practice used in the photography industry, and it's certainly worth considering if you're up to your ears and treading water very, 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 very quickly to keep your head above water right now with the season that we're all in. I want to best equip you to be a very successful photographer that's not going to enter a burnout stage where honestly, crap hits the fan. So don't be in that position. Hire associates. Just please do it the right and legal way. And hopefully you gain lots of valuable insight in this episode to do that legally. I'll be here same time, same place next week, my friends, on the Legal Page podcast.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Page podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.